Good afternoon, everybody, and kudos to you for making it here after a long day and towards the end of a long week for this really important topic of wellness and taking care of ourselves. I'm Barb Kraus-Blackney. I am president of ADVIS, and it's great to see so many of you showing up for this session today, especially because we don't get to see you all as often in person. I just wanted to take a moment as we open to just acknowledge what a year we've had, and I know that that's what we're doing in this session today, and it's so important to take the time to do that. I had an ADVIS board meeting earlier this week, and as I was preparing my report for the board, I remembered that at our end of January board meeting a year ago, at the end of the meeting under new business and trends, we discussed the early emergence of coronavirus in the country and a suspected case in our region, but it was brand new news at that point. So, it just really gave me reason to pause and reflect on that as I was reporting on what we as ADVIS have done in the past few months, let alone the past year. So I think, I'm so pleased that Jen reached out to Jennifer Bryan. Jennifer Braxton reached out to Jennifer Bryan to schedule this session for you, and delighted that we will have Jennifer back, because what we need so much this year is just time to take the time for rest, community, purpose, and reflection, and to be able to have honest and open conversations with one another. And yes, always we as educators, we need to learn and grow too. So we have all of that today. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to ADVIS Director of Professional Development, Jennifer Braxton.
I almost started talking with my mute button on. Thank you, Barbara. Appreciate that intro. And I just wanted to welcome you all and say hello and welcome back to Dr. Bryan. I also want to just give a couple of little details about the program. I see a lot of you have already done this, which means you've read my email. So thank you so very much. We are going to be working in breakout sessions a lot today. And I asked you purposefully to put your school name in the very beginning of your name, so that that will help us sort folks in the breakout rooms. So if you haven't already done that, please hover over your little picture, click on those dots, rename yourself with your school name first, and then you can put your first name. You may not be able to fit first and last, but the school name first, it will help me a lot in sorting you in breakout spaces. We're also going to be using the chat, so you probably already know where that is. I don't need to tell you that, but that's going to be used as well. And this session is being recorded, except for, of course, when we're in breakout spaces, and we will send the recording to you afterwards. But again, we won't be recording you in those breakout spaces. That's for your conversation. Let me just briefly introduce Jennifer. She asked me to make it short and sweet, so I will try and do that. But Dr. Bryan is a psychologist, consultant, coach, speaker, and author with over 35 years experience working in educational and clinical settings. As a founder and principal of Team Finch Incorporated, she specializes in helping schools create inclusive communities by understanding and addressing gender and sexuality diversity. She's also the founder and managing partner of Reset School, a diverse team of experienced educators who initially came together in the spring of 2020 to help school leaders make their communities stronger, more cohesive, and more adaptive during the COVID-19 pandemic. Jennifer is a lifelong educator who deeply understands the dynamics of pre-K through 12 school life. And in all aspects of her work, she uses psychological, pedagogical frameworks and skilled group facilitation and a lively sense of humor. We are delighted to welcome Jennifer back to ADVIS again.
Thank you, Jen. Hi, everybody. Oh, I wish we were all in the same room together so I could ask about how your day was and kind of get the feel from the room, but we're going to make do with Zoom. And it's great to see each one of you. I'm kind of taking in each little square, and I really appreciate you showing up. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's see, screen share. Present. Here we go. Okay. So hopefully you have some paper and something to write with, because we're going to be doing a bunch of reflecting today. So it won't be too much wah, wah, wah from me. So if you haven't got that, get it now. And let's, there's a group of consultants called the Wells Collective, and I've stolen from them that they call this the pretenda instead of the agenda. So we're going to try to get to everything. The only thing I can guarantee is that we will have a hearty break right in the middle, where there'll be time to do what you need to do, dance a little, get a snack. But we're gonna take the time we need to address this very deep topic as best we can. And just to create a sense of how we, this group that's gathered here, will work together, I want to propose 3 agreements for this afternoon. And the first one is pretty obvious, but your empathy tank might be empty right now, depending on how your day went, depending on how your week went. So it might take a little intentionality to just really treat each other this afternoon with kindness. We're not, we're sort of no snark, no judgment. We're just going to be kind with each other and gentle with each other as we interact today. And then the second one is just curiosity. It's hard when you have so much of your energy is going into getting the thing done, kind of putting your head down and plowing through and getting through the day and making sure everybody's masked and distanced. So this afternoon, you don't have to do any problem solving. You don't have to do any problem solving. I would love it if you could just let yourself be more reflective and curious about what you're experiencing and maybe what we're talking about, but see if you can kind of shift set, like unclench your jaw, let your shoulders relax. And that's about how you're going to be present. And I'm inviting you to be as present as you can, given how much energy you have this afternoon. And hoping that you will just be here as you are able. And for some of you, that might mean, I'm going to let myself speak. And for others of you, it might be, I'm just going to let myself be quiet. And for others of you, it might be, I'm going to stick around after the break. I'm not going to turn my camera off. So care, curiosity, and just trying all of us to be present. So we have to have a warm up, the icebreaker, which a lot of people are understandably ambivalent about, but this is how we just kind of are going to arrive. And so you're going to get 30 seconds for each question and load up the chat with your answers, okay? The first question is, what is the least helpful thing someone has said to you this week? Uh-oh.
So I'm going to start reading a few of these. Don't worry so much about COVID. With all due respect, he is not a fit at our school. Everything happens for a reason. I've heard that. I'll get back to you in a week or 2.
It will be fine. Why are you being so negative? Any others? Oh, come on. I know there are others. Could you add this to your homepage? You have a lot on your plate. In the midst of internet issues, I never want to hear about internet issues again. We need to do more. Don't worry about it. Any others? Yeah, it's like XYZ when it's not at all like XYZ. Thank you, Joyce. Okay. Hey, what was the most helpful thing someone said to you this week? What was the most helpful thing?
Still on for Saturday with the tacos.
Don't go to that meeting. Thank you for handling that. Tomorrow is a true snow day, not one of those fake ones. It's okay. We can do that. You're already doing enough. I'm relieved you were here to help. Do you need a hug? Well done. Don't worry about that presentation. Take care of your family tonight. I will take care of dinner tonight. What else? You facilitated that meeting so well. I'll do the video for you. I'll go to the grocery store this week. Now we're talking. Okay, so let's see. What is the worst health-related decision you've made this week? True confessions. Worst health-related decision you've made this week? Doom scrolling. Staying up too late. Breaking my coffee maker. Oh, Michael. Too much chocolate. So many mini candy bars. Not taking my daily walk. Wine for dinner. Go, Heather. Online window shopping. Counting coffee as water. Going down the rabbit hole. What if? What if? What if? Okay, Andrea had the worst takeout ever. Bacon wrapped chicken. Couple more. Worst health-related decision you made this week? Not enough water during the day. Dehydration. Okay. So how about what's the best health-related decision you've made this week? Best one. The bacon wrapped chicken is back. I meditated, I ate a salad, I went to bed early, I went sledding, journaling, walking, only one glass of wine, I breathed, I hit bar class instead of the glass of wine, I didn't answer that 9 p.m. text, I slept, I walked my dog, I had wine with dinner, early to bed, sledding, called the doctor for advice, avoided email after 9:30, avoided it after 8 p.m. Not engaging in an argument I was invited to. That is definitely a good health-related decision. And it's interesting, some people have talked about hydration, because that's the last question. I'm just curious, how many of us have had enough water today? One yes, no, 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 yes, not even close. Yes, yes. Okay, we're sort of in between. Green tea does not count. Nope, yes, no. Okay. All right. Thank you for indulging the icebreaker. So we're here today trying to talk about some of the emotions that all of us have been experiencing during this last year. And we don't know as much about grief in our culture as we do about love. And Elizabeth Gilbert, author who some of you may know, says, grief is a force of nature, of energy that cannot be controlled or predicted. Grief does not obey your plans or your wishes. Grief will do whatever it wants to you, whenever it wants to. In that regard, grief has a lot in common with love. So it's not anything we have a whole lot of control over. And it is a fundamental human experience in the same way. Loving is fundamental, grieving is also. So it's often contradictory, I think, in some people's minds, that if we're talking about maintaining wellness, that we're also talking about working with all of our losses. Instinctively, one might say, well, if we're going to talk about losses, that's going to make us sad, and that can't possibly be a way that we're going to maintain our wellness. So today is really about providing you with a different way of thinking about these two elements. And the only way that we can really understand even a fraction of what we've been experiencing during COVID is this notion of ambiguous loss. And so this is a term and a framework from Pauline Boss, who is a psychologist and sociologist who has really done a lot of work in this realm. And so a loss is ambiguous if there's really a lack of closure, or a clear understanding of what's been lost. And we often talk about closure, and yet it's a natural thing to seek in the light of a loss, but more often than not, and definitely in the case of ambiguous loss, the closure we desire isn't available to us, right? So the first feature of ambiguous loss is that we're not really able to move through it. We don't get the closure. So the other aspect of ambiguous loss is there's often a physical absence with a psychological presence. So maybe last June, some of you had to cancel graduation, right? Or you did a drive-through graduation. So there wasn't really anything physical to point to, but there was certainly a psychological experience that people were having about not having the graduation or not having the retirement party. So something that you can't put your finger on, but that is very alive within you. It's also when we keep looking for answers when there really aren't any available, right? It's that why am I feeling this way? What is happening? Why is it going? Who's in charge? Who can I blame? When will this end? When will this be over? Who's going to help me? Are my kids going to be okay? Are my parents going to be okay? And so the brain really wants to, when you're experiencing something like this, it wants to categorize it somewhere. It wants that closure. It wants to say, oh, that was my beloved pet dying of old age. And we had a ritual, there was some closure. The stress of continuing to seek for those answers, that's part of the mental fatigue that we're all feeling, is as we're like, what if? Somebody talked about the rabbit hole. What if? So that seeking answers when there aren't any. And so it just means that our grief is delayed. and it gets complicated and it's unresolved. It's a lot like dirty laundry piling up in the corner, I like to say. So for each loss, I don't quite understand it. There was no closure. I'm just going to throw it in the corner because I got to get back to work, or I got to take care of my kids, or, I got to keep moving on. And so once that pile of losses or that pile of dirty laundry gets too big, there's no way you're going to tackle it, right? If it's just one load of laundry, all right, I could do that. But if it's now up to like 4 or 5, so our avoidance just gets stronger the more they stack up. And the losses occur on multiple levels. So there's an individual level, right? I'm the person who had a car accident and totaled my beloved car. So that's a loss that happened to me. And then there's a family level of, the grandmother in this family died of COVID. And so that family is experiencing loss because they never were able to see her. They haven't been able to have a funeral or a memorial. And then there's the community level. So when graduation got canceled, it impacted everybody. So the single person, a family group, a community, it's all around us. And then really it's all around us, right? It's global. We have it all around the world. So what Pauline Boss has as her inspiration for looking at ambiguous loss was her childhood experience in World War II. And she says what was traumatic for her about that time was being afraid a lot. And it was mostly afraid because of seeing her parents' faces being afraid. So if we think about our kids and our students watching us, there is something about our trauma or our fatigue, our experience of all these losses that, we are transmitting through no fault of our own to kids who are in our company. So I'm going to invite you to, I wonder if there are any questions about that. We're going to talk in a little bit later about ways to cope with ambiguous loss. But does anybody have any questions about what I've said so far? Okay. So this is a place to be curious. You don't have to solve these problems, but I want you to think about, what does ambiguous loss look like in a global pandemic? Because I think sometimes we forget that we're talking about that scale of an event that is impacting us all. And what is the impact of the prolonged exposure to multiple ambiguous losses on individuals, on families, on communities? And then really, what's its impact on you? That's a big part of why we're here today, is to give you an opportunity to think about how you are coping with what you're experiencing. So I'm interested in your reflections. So if you could grab that piece of paper. Attention without feeling, I began to learn, is only a report. And openness and empathy is necessary if attention is to matter. So as you do the reflective journaling that we're about to do, allow yourself to be in it with some greater openness or empathy than you might. So what are some of the small losses you've experienced over the past 10 months or year? What are some of the medium losses? The really big ones. So I actually want you to make a list. You can set it up however you want, but I want you to list the small losses, the medium-sized losses, and the large losses. And if you find yourself questioning whether something counts, put it on a list. Don't disqualify anything. For those of you who need to keep writing, keep writing. And for those of you who are ready for the next prompt, are there losses on your lists that are connected to some aspect of your identity? Your gender, your race, your religion, your socioeconomic status, your sexuality. If any of these losses are deeply connected to some aspect of your identity, mark that entry with an I. So look over your list. And if this question makes you think of a loss that you hadn't put on the list prior, go ahead and add it. Which of these losses have you actually shared with another person? And I mean, not just in passing, but, had a bona fide, meaningful conversation about. And so go over your list, and the ones that you've actually shared with another person, put an S next to that entry. And then finally, which losses are staying with you? Which are the ones that are really hanging around? Mark those with a little asterisk or star. The ones that are not staying at the bottom of the pile of dirty laundry in the corner. Okay. So we are going to break into small groups, and I have a very particular storytelling protocol that I'm inviting you to use in these small groups. And depending on your personality or your emotional state this afternoon, the idea of going into a storytelling group might just seem appalling, or it might seem great. Bring yourself however you are feeling to your small group. But let me give you the protocol that I am inviting you to use, right? So the very first thing, actually, I didn't really necessarily mean to say how much time, but come back to that. The very first thing you need to do is choose a timekeeper, okay? So somebody volunteers to take the time. We will give you a few extra minutes so that you will have time to go around and just introduce yourselves. What's your school, what's your position, what's your name? Not a big to-do. Each person gets 5 minutes to tell a story about a loss that you've experienced in the last year. So it could be a small, a medium, a large, it could be on your list. It might be something that comes to you in the group. What's important is that you get to tell the story in whatever way you want to. And the rest of the group is silent. They're just listening. There are no clarifying questions. There are no me toos. So the job of the listeners in the group is to just be with this person who is telling the story. And remember, you are not obligated to caretake, problem solve, fix anything. Your job is to be present and listen. And if that person finishes before the 5 minutes are up. So let's say it's my turn and I've only used 4 minutes to tell my story, and I say, okay, I'm done. We're going to keep quiet together for my last minute. We're not going to move in and say, okay, next person. All right. So we're just going to hold that space quietly together. And if I want to hop back in, I can, because it's my time. Any questions about this protocol? Part of the learning today is to try this out. So I'm really hopeful that, take a screenshot of this so you remember what you're supposed to do when you get there. Any questions about the protocol, about what you're supposed to do in your small groups? No questions. No. Okay, so Jen has the unenviable task of sending you all into small groups. And we're going to do, Jen, did I say groups of 4 or 5 when we talked?
You said 4.
Good.
So I have 4. There's one group there's a couple groups that are 3. I have noted that a couple people have slipped out the back door.
Oh, those rascals.
So those groups that I set up with 4 now just have 3. But
so if you get to your breakout room and there are only 2 of you, come back and we will do some reshuffling.
Right.
If there are 3, you can go ahead and do 3, and you will have a little bit of time at the end to talk about the experience of using this protocol. So groups of 3 will have a little debriefing time. But if you're, out there in La La Land and nobody's with you, come back and we'll get you situated.
So how many minutes do you want? 23 minutes?
24.
24 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, you tell me when.
Right now.
All right.
That we associate loss or grief with the big stuff and not, some of the smaller yet meaningful losses.
The time frame kind of threw me too, because I've had losses, but not in the last 9 months.
Well, that's an interesting point too, because sometimes if you have a few, dirty laundry in the corner losses that you haven't dealt with, when something does occur, it can bring back some of the feelings of the old one. Hi, everybody. We were just debriefing a little bit. And before we take our hearty 10-minute break, I invite you to unmute yourself and share anything that you want to about your experience in the small group. The group we were just debriefing with, they had some, it was challenging to fill the 5 minutes. And we were looking at some of the reasons why that might be. But anybody else, feel free to unmute and just share something about your experience, something about the protocol, anything you want to offer out to the group.
I would just say that an interesting point that was raised is we all realized that in some ways we're privileged because we might have family nearby, or might be with our family, or might have financial resources. And we feel like we almost can't grieve for our COVID losses because we have some things in place. So people are worse off than I am. And a general observation that we shared was that it's almost like we don't allow ourselves to feel that loss because we're better off than some other people. And that was a common experience.
Pete, thank you so much. I'm going to write myself a note so we can talk about that after the break, because that's very typical, the sort of disenfranchising of my grief because it's not legit compared to others. What else?
I think the silence was helpful in that protocol only because when you hear, for lack of a better word, bad news, you want to respond to show that you have empathy. And right now, I think going back to the questions you originally had, which were what was something that somebody said that was not helpful or something that was helpful, I think just silence and the person know that you're listening sometimes that's the most powerful thing. Like just listening, like truly being in the moment and listening to them is actually all that a person needs and none of the other stuff. So I really took that as a moment to just process that. But I thought that was interesting coming on the back end of some of those questions you had.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we're socialized to feel like if we're sitting with a group of people, we should be talking.
I would say too that as teachers, we're often the ones taking care of our students. And so spending 5 minutes, someone mentioned that seemed like a long time. Spending 5 minutes talking about yourself, and then not just talking about yourself, but a difficult piece, something that was a loss, is even more difficult. So it was important to hold that space. And like Kiora mentioned, holding that silence. But I think, some of us, I can speak from the I perspective, I would struggle in sharing for 5 minutes because I'm used to hearing the stories of others or like my students.
Right, so it's a kind of professional hazard, right, of being a teacher or being the counselor or being the nurse, that you're much more oriented to listening to others. Let's get 2 more comments and then we'll take our break.
Well, I think in addition to that, we're also really used to wearing a veil because we have to be so many things for other people, right? You're like, you always have to be like the utmost model of everything for parents and then for students. And then you have a professional community that you're negotiating as well. So, yeah.
Thank you, Louis. It raises a really fascinating question of like, when do you, as a teacher, when is your authenticity, the absence of that veil, especially around emotions, when is that okay, right? When would that actually be a good thing to do as a teacher, as a professional? One more.
And at the end, when we had a couple of extra minutes, we were talking about some of the things that just might sort of stay permanent changes. And one of the things about that, when I think about what you were talking about with loss, is it's hard to know what we have lost forever and what we have lost, but we might get back.
Yes.
I think that's a really challenging part of what we're all going through.
Right, and that is a characteristic of ambiguous loss. There's no closure yet, and you don't even know if there will be, right? Okay, so by my clock, it's 4:08, and so we're gonna get back here at 4:18, and when you get back, we're gonna talk about ways that you cope with ambiguous loss, and we're also gonna have time for a little joy before we finish up. And I am gonna play a little music. And so if you feel like dancing during the break, you can do that too. So there's my stretch break slide. So we'll see you in 10 minutes and I'll see what I've got here. Welcome back, welcome back. Okay, I'm going to read you a story now. The name of this book is The Shadow Elephant by Nadine Robert and Valerio Vidali. Some said the elephant was gloomy, and some said he was trying to hide his sadness. Some said he preferred the shadows. The animals of the savannah wanted to find a way to cheer the elephant up again. Perhaps if they told him a funny story. The monkey threw himself into it and told the funniest joke he knew. The one about the banana stuck in an ear. It was so silly. It got laughs every time. Not a smile, not a sound. The elephant listened attentively, but remained in the shadows. Next, the ostrich sisters gave it a try. They performed a dance they had invented called the swing can. The way they tensed their faces and twisted their necks was hilarious. The elephant watched them without so much as a twitch and remained in the shadows. Seeing that the elephant did not feel like laughing, the crocodile thought a treat might perk him up. He brought him a bowl full of young acacia leaves, his favorite. But that did not work either. The elephant blinked his eyes, sighed through his trunk, and remained in the shadows. A small mouse who was scurrying by stopped. Out of breath, she asked the elephant, "Could I rest here next to you?" "You're not here to tell me a story?" "No, I'd just like to sit here for a moment." "You're not here to change my mind?" "No, but if you'd really like to know, I've walked all day trying to find a golden key that belongs to my sister. It's the most precious thing she owns. And I took the key without asking and then lost it while playing on the savannah. I've searched and walked and searched some more. I've wandered so far that now I'm lost. I'm afraid that I'll never find the key, nor my way home." The elephant sighed, gave a little hiccup, and started to cry. He cried silently, a flood of tears like he might never stop. Seeing him, the mouse started to cry too. Drained of his tears and feeling much better, the elephant took one step, then another, and emerged from the shadows. He walked slowly toward the mouse. "Let's walk together. The moonlight will show us the way to your house." "On the way, I'd really like to hear your story." "Well, I can try." So why am I reading a bunch of grown-up educators a children's book?
Because it works.
What makes it work, Diego?
Well, the imagery, you can see yourself in any of the animals presented, any of the solutions presented, and you can see more. You can see something you didn't think about, you didn't think of.
If you read this to your students, regardless of what age you teach, kindergarten all the way up to 12th, what impact do you think it would have? How would they respond? Can anybody imagine reading the story to their students, or is it just a little too out there?
Well, I think with prompting that they could connect in a lot of ways to the feeling of being lost. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious about what prompting they might need, because one of the things that I took away from our little bit of debrief is that how we're defining loss matters. And, you know, maybe our kids will also need to know that it's okay to feel sad. I mean, that is so I'm reading a book right now. It's called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. We are a culture that does not like sadness. We do not like grief. We do not like people to be blue. And so when we ask ourselves or our students not to feel what they really feel, that's dehumanizing. And so there's so many aspects of the pandemic that have felt dehumanizing, you know, having to wear masks, not being able to touch, having to be apart. So I'd love for you to think about the way that not letting ourselves and our students say how we really feel about things is also dehumanizing. And it's a little bit like what Keo was saying earlier. It's not about the solutions or the fixing or the can. It's really just about being with each other and holding each other's a space with each other. Okay. So let's talk about ways to cope with ambiguous loss. And this will be our segue into moving away from loss to feelings of joy. The very first way to cope is to name it. You know, if you give a name to what you are experiencing, that is the first step in having it not be so disorienting. Remember earlier I was saying our brain wants to make sense of and categorize. And I know a lot of people will have taken to saying, I'm just having a COVID moment. And so what does that really translate into? Does that mean you're tired? Does that mean you're distracted? Does that mean you're lonely? So giving this ambiguous loss a name, and if you want to, with your students, give it a different name, you can, but naming it is extremely helpful. It helps people feel less disoriented by it. Another way is to connect with others who are experiencing that ambiguous loss too. And so because you're working in a school setting, there are natural cohorts of people who are having a shared experience. And again, I think there's a fear that, you know, we don't want to bring everybody down. And yet this is what's really happening. And we shouldn't be afraid of the sadness that some of us are feeling at different times about what's happening. Give your mind a break each day from trying to find an answer. And again, naming with your students that, oh, it's time for our break from worrying and figuring and doing it. We're having our daily meditation, visualization, distraction. It could be, you know, a dance. It could be a poem. But you're naming it as we are allowing our brains to take a break from worrying about things that we really don't have any control over. And then talking to somebody that you trust about your grief. And maybe this gets back to what Pete was saying, the shame that you might feel about sharing it openly, either because, you you're working in a culture where people don't talk about being sad, or because you feel your privilege, all the ways that your privilege make it, sort of you're disqualified. You don't get to do any grieving because there are people who have lost so much more. And grief doesn't pay attention to that scale of legitimacy. So if it's something you're feeling, it's bona fide, it's legit. And then it is really about celebrating what remains and creating what's new and what's next and what's now. And I think in my work with schools, I've seen a wish to hop over the first few steps and go right to how cool is it that we get to do this, or how great is it that we get to make that. You can get there, but you got to and it's not linear. Grief comes in cycles. But this is where the connection to wellness. So if we deal with our losses, then we make space for other kinds of feelings: celebratory, creative, joyous. So before you are going to go back into your small groups for a little bit, I would love for you to jot down your reflections about, what do you celebrate? What are you celebrating with your colleagues, with your students, as a community? Make that list of the things that you're still celebrating. And then what are you creating? What are you building, again, with your colleagues, with students, as a community? And what's a new feature of pandemic school that actually brings you joy? So let's take a few minutes for you to jot down your reflections, and they can also be in the form of a list. What are you celebrating? What are you creating? What's bringing you some joy? And again, small, medium, large, little things count. All right, one more task before you go into your small group. So we're going to create something new right now. How many of you have ever written a 6-word story? Yeah, a few hands. So that's what we're going to do, is you're going to select one of your joys from your list, and using just 6 words, you are going to tell the story of that joy. So an example: yesterday I went snowshoeing. Total joy. 6 words, right? So we're going to take a moment, and then we're going to go into our small groups, and we're just going to share our 6-word stories and talk a little bit. But take some time now to capture your joy. Grammar does not matter. Raise a hand if you need a little more time. Okay, we'll take one more minute. And for those of you who are cruising, you can write a second one. Okay, I'm so excited to hear some of these. So what we're going to do is Jen is going to send you into groups of 6, only for 10 minutes. And what you're going to do when you get there is each person is going to read their 6-word story twice. Slow and steady, 2 times. And so each person will do that, and then take a few minutes to talk together about your sentences, your joys, what it's like to hear each other's. And then we're going to come back and have Q&A and get out of here. Okay? Okay, we may have lost a few folks.
Yeah, everybody's back. So.
Okay. Just curious about your 6-word sentences. Anybody want to unmute and share? Or you could also be shy and put it in the chat if you like.
We thought ours all sort of could go together as a poem. Like we weren't expecting, they all sort of connected in a different way. It was fun.
Lay it on us. Can we have
Oh,
the
I
whole
don't remember
poem?
them all, but it was, I don't know. It was a fun conversation. It was really lovely.
Good.
Yeah.
We didn't actually connect them. It just felt like after people read them, we could see, even though the topics were different.
Mm-hmm. Other observations about the conversation about joy? What did you notice? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you, Jennifer. That many teachers or people, guidance counselors in our session are with the students in person, and how resilient the children are, even the very littlest ones, in wearing their masks and all day at school and following the protocols, when many of us wouldn't have expected that from kindergartners, pre-K students, that they wear their masks and they're joyful and they're happy to be together, and so are we happy to be together with them. So It was a nice observation of the resiliency of children.
Yeah. Wendy, go ahead.
In a couple of the poems in our group, also some of the changes that were losses, like going from a class to a small cohort, or going from group projects to individual projects. It came up in a couple people, and there was a loss there, but also there was some surprising, there was some sense of being surprised by actually what that did bring, that the small groups has meant kids and adults being known more deeply, and in a way that has been striking, and that there's some of the kids sharing of their individual projects, they missed the group projects, but that there was some real beautiful things that came out of that. So that really resonated with me.
Cool. Other takeaways from the small group? So the floor is open now in terms of, I'm interested in your experience of moving through the different exercises of this session. We started with loss and we've ended with joy, how you experience that. Is it something you can imagine using with your students? Questions for me, anything we want to do with our final 8 minutes?
I have a reflection I'd like to share. I think in the classroom, I'm always aware of ending things with joy and doing that intentionally, but I don't necessarily practice that myself. And so doing that here, I see the benefit of why that really works and how that leaves you feeling a different way. So it was nice to experience that. Thank you.
Yeah. What else?
I liked the warm-up questions at the beginning. I was thinking because they made me laugh, because some of them were things I've been holding on to not so joyfully. But I could envision them being part of a faculty meeting, as a way of opening up a faculty meeting, just to let people sort of let a little steam off.
Yeah. Well, it sends a message like we're going to really tell the truth about what we're experiencing. If I, as the facilitator, say, tell me the least helpful thing someone said to you, it's like, oh, we're not going to posture. We're going to, and, I was telling a friend was asking what I was doing this afternoon, and I told her, and she said, oh, that's great. You're helping the teachers with self-care. I don't really see what we've done here as exclusively about self-care, right? A self-care conversation. we have really needed a framework to understand what we're experiencing every day, right? So this, to me, isn't just about, oh, we took a little time to take a bath, self-care. No, we're naming the thing that's happening every day and has been happening every day for almost a year, and giving ourselves some permission to name how that feels on a day-to-day basis. What else?
For me, it was good to see different people on a Zoom call. So instead of the same faces all the time, no offense to the people I work with, but I think it's just all just kind of this variety and everything. I think that's been great, and just to also know that the struggle for our school is the same, the struggles that everybody else is experiencing. So, and I was talking about this with a colleague prior to this meeting. Is like, this is certainly, we want to be as good as we can during a global pandemic, but at the same time, we don't necessarily want to be perfect at operating in a global pandemic. Eventually you want to, get past this. So I think it's just, there's, and for lack of a better word, kind of a triage right now to let's get through what we're going through right now, and keep the community strengths that we've built during this time, and build on those as we get past this.
Yeah, I'll say, Ben, one of my frustrations during this time is that I don't think that the independent schools have done a very good job of redefining what the value proposition is of the private school education during a pandemic. So this idea is like that we want to, we still want to be excellent, and we still want to be the best at what we do. During a pandemic, the community that you offer, like the kids, that parents can send a child to your schools, and there are adults who care about them, who are paying attention to them, who are helping them cope. That's really the value proposition during a pandemic. If you think about other pandemics in history, I don't think there was, certainly there wasn't Zoom school, but that what you're providing, the community that you're providing, the care that you're providing, in my mind anyway, is as important as, content mastery. And so I think it means that we have to maybe not worry quite as much about performance, and are we doing better than our peer schools, and just kind of dropping it into the truth of now, which is it's really taxing emotionally to be in this protracted disruption, even with good things going on. Like Christine, I really appreciated hearing about the kindergartners wearing their masks and being full of joy. One or two more thoughts?
It was nice to share feelings and thoughts without being solution oriented. Like, that's stressful to share something and then know that someone is going to like come in and then be like, oh, I know. And yeah, no, it's not helpful. So.
Right. And so I would you can think about what, if anything, of this you want to bring back to your school, bring back to your students. Somebody said a faculty meeting. I've done a similar session like this with the school community, and you can do it with a classroom, with a pod, with a division. Anytime you can bring groups of people together to do something like this, you're building all of our resilience. If you look at the studies on building resilience, your capacity to cope with setbacks and losses and frustrations of, failures of things, really build our ability to cope. So this is where doing this emotional work is definitely part of wellness. Anybody have a final thought? I can play a little Alicia Keys as we find our way out.
I didn't want to speak twice in a row, but I do have an ending thought, and that was that we did this really powerful exercise last year in our classroom where we told the kids that everybody walks into this room with a weight that they're bearing. And then we tell the kids to not write their names down, but just write some weight, something that weighs on them as they walk into the room. And then we let them know that we're going to read all of them so they can put whatever they want that they would like shared anonymously. And then we read all of these pieces of paper and really powerful things come out. Like I can't get through it without crying. And we then put them all back in the bag, and we hang the bag above the entrance to our room. And it's a reminder to every kid as they walk through that if people aren't treating you just right, like they're carrying that. That's what they're carrying with them. Yeah, it's a great activity.
I love that. So any kind of ritual like that, Louis, that you can build in and that your kids know they'll be doing on Tuesdays or they'll be doing every time you come together, they will use those structured opportunities to manage their affect, manage their emotions. So it doesn't have to look like this, but doing something, and yours sounds lovely, is what matters. So thank you so much for coming, for spending this time at the end of a long day. I hope it left you feeling a little bit lighter, like the shadow elephant. And I wish you well. If you have any follow-up questions for me, you're welcome to email me anytime. And thanks again.